Welcome back to Nacho Wrestling, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at one of, if not the greatest modern story in professional wrestling, the Bloodline. From being pure cinema to jumping the shark about several different times for some fans, the Bloodline story has been encapsulating in one way or another, and that is why, in today's video, we are going to talk about how it works, and more importantly, how it is framed similar to the mob movies of my youth, The Godfather and Goodfellas. Don't ask, I had a weird childhood. With that out of the way, let's jump into today's video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling. It is hard to think about it now, but the Bloodline story began all the way back 4 years ago at SummerSlam when Roman Reigns returned with an all-new, all-different look, and a manager as well in Paul Heyman. On that payback pay-per-view after SummerSlam when Roman came out at the end of the match and just essentially took the Universal title back, was perfect, and from then on out, the Tribal Chief was born. Soon after, we would see the next main character of our story enter the scene in the original right-hand man, Jey Uso. Jey would initially enter the scene as opposition to Roman and Paul, not agreeing with what Roman was doing and how he was doing it. He would eventually fall in line, not by choice, but because he needed to in order to protect himself and his brother Jimmy. Speaking of Jimmy, he would make his first appearance in this story at Hell in a Cell 2020, coming into the ring to save Jey, and then immediately getting choked out by Roman, forcing Jey to quit and fall in line. The final main character would not show up until a year and some change later, at Clash at the Castle in Cardiff, when Solo Sikoa would appear as the enforcer for the Tribal Chief, screwing Drew McIntyre out of his title. And of course, it should go without saying that all of these guys, with the exception of Paul Heyman, are legitimately related, making the on-screen chemistry so much better and the emotions feel more genuine between the four. And from the jump, fans have been interested in the story in some shape or fashion since its beginning, all the way back at SummerSlam 2020. But I know, you're still probably asking me how the Bloodline is like Goodfellas. Let me explain. If you have never seen Goodfellas, it is a mobster movie about Henry Hill, an Italian and Irish New Yorker who would affiliate himself with the mob in his hometown, and work for them in some capacity starting at a very young age. There is also Jimmy Conway, Henry's main mentor, and who he would go to for help with anything since they both could not become made men inside the mafia. And then there is Tommy DeVito, who, let's just say, does not have the happiest of endings. In this analogy, Roman Reigns is Henry Hill, while the only difference, of course, being that Roman is able to be a made man. He's in charge of the family. Roman and Henry both have an insatiable lust for power and would stop at nothing to achieve that power. For Henry, this was running and gunning and stealing and doing anything the family asked of him so he could be trusted and given at least the smallest bit of power. For Roman, it is the ability to provide for his entire family, from his cousins to his kids to his grandparents. Roman wants the power not only as a status symbol, but as a means to provide. Both men also have their own personal wise men. If you've seen Goodfellas, Jimmy Conway may be the first thought you have for Paul Heyman as the wise man, but I actually think Paul Heyman is more like Big Paulie, because throughout the film, whenever Henry struggled, like really struggled, he went to Big Paulie for help. Roman would always go to Paul for anything. It also works the same way in the movie. Paulie says he sees Henry as a son, and Roman and Paul definitely have a father and son type dynamic as well. I've talked a lot about Jimmy Conway already, and that is because he is an integral part of the movie. Henry gets into a lot of trouble because of his dealings with Jimmy, but at the same time, Jimmy was looking out for his friend. That is why Jimmy Conway is Solo Sikoa. Solo, like Jimmy, was the hothead who was also quiet, cold, and calculating. Nowadays, Solo is more like a weird mix of Jimmy and Tommy DeVito gunning for the top even though he knew he won't get it. That leaves the Usos. Together, the Usos both resemble parts of Tommy DeVito. Jimmy Uso is the side of Tommy that is an inherent goofball and always cracking jokes, like the infamous "you think I'm a clown" scene, while Jey, on the other hand, is representing that ruthless side of Tommy that lost his cool and whacked Billy Bats. Now that you have an understanding of Goodfellas and how the original Bloodline characters fit into their roles, let's take a look at how they have developed and intertwined together. The Bloodline are able to meld and mesh their feelings and emotions across their individual feuds while bringing it all together as one central problem for them. The same way that in any mob movie like The Goodfellas or The Godfather, if one guy has an issue, then everyone has that issue. And they will all help solve the problem, just as long as it is the guy who initially had the problem finishes the job, so to speak. The only difference is that Roman was more methodical when he actually helped versus when a mob boss actually helps. Roman Reigns dealt with his issues from the get-go. Braun dealt with. Jey fell in line. Jimmy fell in line. Daniel Bryan and Edge smashed, stacked, and pinned. No matter who stepped up to Roman, Roman was able to deal with them, often with some help and interference from Jimmy and Jay, and eventually came Solo, who became the main muscle for Roman from then on out. If anyone wanted to have a match with Roman, it was almost like a routine that they would have to have a match with Solo first before getting to the Tribal Chief. This is also where I should mention that once Solo appeared, Jimmy and Jay both became 10 times more hapless than ever before. But there was one more guy that joined the group, and of course, I could not just leave him out. The honorary Uce, Sami Zayn. Sami throws a huge wrench in my plan because I don't know what character he would be from the Goodfellas. In all honesty, my immediate thought is Henry Hill's brother Michael Hill, who would often ask Henry about mob stuff in a more comedic tone in the film. However, it is such a small role and it does not really work, and this is where I want to mention how a lot of people often compare the Bloodline to the Godfather story, which I have seen, but I don't know as much as Goodfellas, especially Godfather 2 and 3. All members of the Bloodline were able to build up genuine relationships and love for each other that could be seen on the TV screens every time they were making each other laugh during segments where they should have been somewhat serious. That speaks to the immense storytelling that they were able to pull off, and often this story has been referred to as cinema, and there's a very good reason for that. This is now where I want to take a look at some of the key plot points and moments from the Bloodline story so far, and how the pacing between these moments has been a net positive for all involved. Let us take a look at the first major moment in the Bloodline story, when Roman met Jay for a singles match and absolutely massacred him. This moment absolutely defined Jay for the next 2 years. Hell, still to this day it defines Jay, seemingly dealing with the mental abuse and effects of that abuse from his cousin. And it was all just to keep his brother Jimmy safe. There was, of course, when both Usos finally acknowledged Roman and fell in line. This continued to advance the idea of a reluctant Jimmy Uso, and determined to protect his brother Jay. Slowly over time after this moment, there would begin a shift in both men. Jimmy became more comfortable with the work the Bloodline was doing, and Jay became more aggressive and hot-headed. And Solo was just Solo. 2023 was absolutely the year of the Bloodline. From the Royal Rumble all the way to SummerSlam, they had every main event of almost every WWE PLE. Even both nights of WrestleMania 39 were theirs. While a lot of people were starting to get tired of the story, at this point they would be making some huge shifts during 2023 to add more dimension and character traits to everyone involved. For starters, I would be burned alive for not mentioning the time we had the honorary Uce crack Roman in the back Seth Rollins style. Or what about when Roman got his lick back on Sami at Elimination Chamber in his hometown and in front of his wife? Or when the Usos finally got their deserved WrestleMania moment in the main event of Night 1, taking on Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn for the WWE Tag Titles. And of course, the most shocking moment of 2023, when Roman retained on Night 2 of WrestleMania against Cody. I don't really need to talk more about that moment. However, the next big moment to come out of this was centered around Jey Uso. When Jimmy and Jay left the Bloodline, it was a cathartic moment that felt so genuine and so real. Both guys had been under the thumb of Roman for such a long time. They had done things they were not proud of, lost people they saw as friends. This led to the great tag match at Money in the Bank 2023, which was Roman and Solo versus the Usos, or as I like to call it, Bloodline Civil War V1. This is where Roman would finally be pinned for the first time since December 15th of 2019. By none other than Jey Uso. This would lead to what many people would consider to be the shark jumping moment for the Bloodline story, when Jay versus Roman happened at SummerSlam 2023, which had Jimmy return from injury, only to turn on Jay and rejoin the Bloodline. This would be the one major plot hole in the story. The way Jimmy claimed that it was Jay who forced him to leave the Bloodline, when it was obviously a joint effort from the two of them, especially when they both superkicked Roman together. No matter how you feel about his part in the story, it did lead to the Usos being split up for realsies and actually being given their own characters, which has served both of them greatly. At the end of the day, it's like Omni-Man asked Mark, what will you have in 5,000 years? I like to think that after 5,000 years, the Bloodline story will be looked back on as one of the first long-term stories to bring WWE into their modern-day renaissance. We're currently 4 years in on the Bloodline story, and it does not seem like the end is anywhere near. From Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman, to Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, and Jacob Fatu, the Bloodline story has been through an evolution process like no other. It has also been the true backbone of WWE TV since fans have returned to the shows. Every word that is said has been made to feel important. Whether it is said in a mic, backstage, or picked up from one of the cameras during a brawl, Every aspect of this story was important and required attentive viewing. The Bloodline story has allowed for WWE to experiment with new ideas and longer form stories or sagas, like the Judgment Day and their inevitable civil war, or the slow burn return of Uncle Howdy and the Wyatt Six. Even Chad Gable and his new Alpha Academy took its time getting to where they are now. This is all because Triple H knows to hold and hold and hold until the fans' excitement and anticipation is at an all-time high. That is why Cody won at Mania 40, not because The Rock said so. That is it for today's video. Let me know what you guys thought about it down in the comments below. Do you enjoy the Bloodline storyline? Do you not enjoy the Bloodline storyline? What has been your favorite moment from the story? Let me know down below. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay up to date on all things Nacho Wrestling. And I will see you guys next time.